The apartment was dim, nearly swallowed by shadow. A weak bulb buzzed overhead, flickering now and then like it was tired of trying. The walls, stained and peeling, held the echoes of years past, years that hadn't been kind. In the corner, the refrigerator stood open, its inside barren except for a cracked egg and a carton of sour milk. A cockroach darted beneath the worn linoleum floor, disappearing as quickly as it came. The air smelled like smoke, old newspapers, and something bitter, something you couldn't quite name but never forgot. Before we begin, if you believe that no matter where we start in life, we all deserve a chance to rise, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. On this channel, we tell true stories that prove hope is stronger than hardship. Now, let me tell you about Liz. This was home for young Liz Murray, not the kind you read about in bedtime stories or saw in holiday commercials. There were no warm cookies in the oven, no comforting arms at the end of a bad day. Here, in a one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx during the late 1980s, home meant surviving in silence. Liz sat cross-legged on the floor, a crayon in her hand and 1,000 questions in her eyes. She was no older than 6, maybe 7, yet already too familiar with things no child should understand. On the couch nearby, her mother Jean slouched in a tangled blanket, her body limp with exhaustion. One arm dangled off the edge, a cigarette barely hanging between 2 fingers. Her lips twitched in sleep, murmuring broken pieces of dreams or maybe memories, as a used syringe glinted faintly on the coffee table beside her. Jean had once been vibrant, a teenager who rebelled with laughter and wild hair, but heroin had stolen that version long ago. What remained was a shell that flickered in and out of awareness, chasing highs to escape a reality that was too heavy to bear. Liz watched her mother for a long moment. She didn't cry or call out. She learned that neither did much. Sometimes her mother would hold her tight and whisper how much she loved her, that she was her light in the darkness. But other times, like now, Jean drifted far away, unreachable no matter how loudly Liz wished for her to come back. Across the room, her father Peter sat hunched at the kitchen table, surrounded by towers of books and scribbled notes. He muttered softly under his breath, the same way he always did when lost in thought, something about Plato or Einstein or the failing systems of the world. His mind was sharp, brilliant even, but his brilliance lived in theories and tangents, not in paychecks or parenting. He filled notebooks with ideas and philosophies, but the refrigerator remained empty and Liz's shoes still had holes in them. Still, Liz didn't hate them. That might surprise people later when they hear her story. But hate requires expectation, and by the time she could form words, she had already understood that life inside these walls was different from the one outside. There were no school lunches, no clean laundry, no one asking about homework. And yet, in the rare moments of clarity, when Jean would sing along to an old Motown record, or when Peter would explain the stars in a way that made her eyes widen, there was love. It was real. Fragile, but real. She stood up and padded barefoot toward the fridge. The cold air brushed her face as she opened it, hopeful out of habit. There was nothing new inside, of course. She closed the door gently. Her stomach ached, but not in a way she noticed anymore. Hunger had become just another part of her, like the color of her hair or the size of her shoes. Not something to complain about, just something that was. Back near the radiator, she picked up a crumpled envelope and began to draw. Her fingers moved quickly, sketching a house with flowers, a mother and father holding hands, a little girl with a smile too wide for her face. There was a sun, of course. There was always a sun. That was how Liz imagined the life she wished for, bright and warm and full of certainty. Her drawings were her escape. In them, she created a version of the world that made sense. One where her mom made breakfast in the morning and her dad took her to the library. Where no one whispered outside their door at night or knocked with fists demanding rent. In her drawings, she was safe. From behind her, Jean coughed, a dry, wheezing sound that broke the quiet. Liz turned to look, but her mother didn't stir further. Just rolled onto her side, the cigarette now fallen, ashes scattering like gray snow. Liz moved slowly to pick it up and place it in the tray. Then she sat beside the radiator again and looked out the window. It was dark outside, save for the occasional passing headlights and the orange glow of a distant street lamp. Somewhere out there, children were probably brushing their teeth, being tucked in, told they were loved. She didn't envy them, not really. But she wondered what it felt like to go to bed with a full stomach, to wake up without fear. That kind of life felt like a story someone else told, not hers. Still, she hoped. That was the part no one could take from her. Not the rats in the walls, not the police sirens, not even the hunger. Deep down, in a place untouched by the cold or the chaos, she believed there had to be something more. A world outside this room. A path that led somewhere better. And so she kept drawing, kept imagining, kept believing, even in the stillness, even when everything around her said otherwise. In the quiet, her voice might have been small, but it was steady, and it would not stay unheard forever. As time passed, Liz's world continued to shrink. The apartment, once a haven, now felt like a cage. The same peeling wallpaper, the same empty fridge, the same silence. The only thing that ever changed was the constant reminder of what was slipping away. Jean's addiction had a way of eroding everything. Days blurred into nights, and weeks into months. Some mornings, Liz would wake up to find her mother barely conscious, her breath shallow, her eyes clouded. But Jean would still smile weakly, even when Liz wasn't sure if she was really seeing her. The highs had become routine, a cycle that Liz learned to navigate with a strange blend of distance and longing. Peter, too, had his own ways of checking out. When he wasn't buried in his books, he was somewhere in his mind, lost in thoughts too big to anchor him to reality. It wasn't that he didn't love Liz, it's just that his love was more abstract, wrapped in ideas, not actions. The kind of love you could talk about, but not really feel. He was the kind of father who would give you theories on the meaning of life, but not a warm meal when you were hungry. The weight of it all, the neglect, the instability, the constant chaos, began to take its toll. Liz, still a child, couldn't grasp why it was happening or what she could do to stop it. She only knew it was getting harder to breathe, harder to ignore the emptiness that crept in when she wasn't paying attention. And then, one day, it was too much. There was no defining moment, no dramatic argument or sudden break. It happened slowly, like the erosion of a shoreline, until one day, the waves swallowed the last bit of land. Liz's father was the first to go. His mind had wandered so far from the present that he'd stopped trying to hold on to anything, his family, his responsibilities, even the reality around him. One day, without warning, Peter packed a bag. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't leave a note. He just walked out the door and never came back. For Liz, it wasn't a shock. It was a sad inevitability. She had watched him fade for years, like an image out of focus, his presence growing more and more distant. But even so, when he was gone, it was as if the last thread holding her world together had snapped. Jean, too, had begun to withdraw in her own way. The addiction was no longer just a part of her. It had become her. She couldn't fight it anymore. And as the years passed, the drug's grip only tightened. Liz, now 11, learned how to make do on her own. She scrounged for food, hid her hunger behind a smile, and took care of Jean the best way she knew how, by staying out of her way. But eventually, the world outside grew too loud, too demanding. The landlord started knocking on the door, the rent piled up, and the neighbors grew tired of the noise. Bills that couldn't be paid started to stack higher than the books on Peter's old desk. The weight of it all crushed what little stability Liz had left. It was a rainy morning when Liz came home to find the door locked, the windows shut tight. She knocked, called out, but no one answered. The landlord, who had been patient at first, was no longer willing to wait. The eviction notice was taped to the door. The apartment that had once been a home was now just a place full of memories that Liz wasn't ready to leave behind. But leave, she had to. Eviction isn't just the loss of a home. It's the loss of every expectation you ever had about what family is, what safety is, what love is. It's a quiet death that steals everything without making a sound. Liz stood there in the hallway, the rain trickling down the cracked walls of the building, her heart pounding in her chest. She thought about running back to the apartment, banging on the door, screaming for it all to come back. But there was nothing left to come back to. Her mother was lost to the world of addiction. Her father was gone without a trace, and the apartment was nothing but a shell, a place where dreams went to die. The streets, cold and unfamiliar, beckoned to her like an escape, even though she had no idea where to go or what to do next. She didn't have a plan, didn't even have a destination in mind. She only knew one thing: she couldn't stay here. The apartment wasn't home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. So she walked, through the rain, through the slums of the Bronx, with nothing but the weight of her thoughts and the fear of what lay ahead. She had nothing. No family, no safety net, no place to call her own. But in the midst of the uncertainty, there was something inside her, a flicker of defiance, a tiny ember of hope that refused to die. Liz wasn't sure where she was headed. She only knew she couldn't stay in the wreckage of what was. So she kept walking. And in that simple act of movement, there was something that stirred deep within her. The quiet promise of survival, of finding a way to make it out, no matter the odds. The streets outside were cold, but inside Liz's chest, there was a warmth beginning to form. She didn't know it yet, but this would be the first step of many, steps that would lead her toward a future she couldn't yet see, but one that she would fight for with everything she had. It was a cold night in the Bronx, rain falling in relentless sheets, soaking the streets and turning them into rivers of gray. Liz had been wandering the city for hours, trying to escape the weight of her thoughts, the ache in her chest, the loneliness that seemed to cling to her like a shadow. She hadn't slept in days, and hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't bring herself to rest. Not yet. She found herself standing in a narrow alley, the walls slick with rain, her shoes squelching as she shifted her weight. The sound of laughter echoed in the distance, and Liz glanced down the street to see a group of teenagers, young, carefree, heading home from school. They were laughing, talking about their day, their world still wide open in front of them. As she watched them, something in Liz's heart twisted. She wanted that life. She wanted what they had: stability, a home, a future. For the first time, Liz felt the full weight of everything she had lost. Her parents, both lost to their own demons. The broken promises, the instability, the feeling of being invisible. She had tried so hard to survive, to fight through the mess of her life. But now, watching these kids walk away, she knew she was ready to want more. She wasn't just tired of being hungry. She wasn't just tired of being cold. She was tired of surviving. She wanted to live. She wanted education, stability, a chance at a real future. She stood there in the rain, her mind racing, a fire kindling inside her. And then, in that dark, lonely alley, she made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. No, this was the moment she would fight for more. Liz made her way to a small shelter, the one she'd heard about from an old acquaintance who had disappeared from her life years ago. She didn't know what the future would look like, but she knew she had to take the first step. That night, she asked for help, a request she never thought she'd make. She didn't have a bed to sleep in, but she had a burning desire to change, and for the first time, she wasn't going to let her circumstances dictate who she was going to become. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, hunger, and relentless determination. Liz was back in school. She had found a spot in Humanities Preparatory Academy, a small alternative high school that offered a chance to students who had been left behind. It wasn't much, but it was the opportunity she needed. In the beginning, Liz felt like an outsider. The other kids at the school had their own struggles, but none of them seemed to carry the weight of the world like she did. She had no permanent home. She slept on couches and stairwells, wherever she could find a spot. But every morning, she showed up. She walked into that school, tired and hungry, but determined. She found a quiet spot in the library or tucked away in a corner of the hallway and studied. She would read everything she could get her hands on, even when it felt impossible to keep going. The pain in her stomach from not eating was nothing compared to the ache in her heart to prove to herself that she could do this. She wasn't going to let her past be the reason she failed. The teachers saw something in Liz that she didn't see in herself at first. They noticed her resilience, her refusal to quit. They noticed how hard she worked, even when she was barely keeping her eyes open from exhaustion. One teacher, Mr. Carter, pulled her aside one afternoon and said something that stuck with her. "You have a gift, Liz. Don't waste it." At first, Liz didn't believe him. She couldn't. She had been invisible for so long that hearing someone believe in her felt foreign. But slowly, she began to believe it too. She pushed through her fears, her doubts, and the weight of her past. In just 2 years, she completed 4 years of high school. It wasn't easy. Every exam was a battle. Every day was a challenge, but she did it. She didn't have the luxury of a stable home life, or even a bed to sleep in, but she had something far more powerful, a will to succeed that no amount of hardship could break. As graduation approached, Liz could hardly believe how far she had come. She had already surpassed every expectation, and yet, the future still seemed like a vast, unknown landscape. But then, one day, a flyer caught her eye. It was a scholarship opportunity from the New York Times, a scholarship for exceptional students who had overcome significant obstacles. Liz didn't think she had a chance. She was just one of thousands of kids who had fought against impossible odds. But something inside her refused to let go. She took a deep breath and filled out the application, pouring her heart into every word. She didn't have much to offer, but she had her story. In the weeks that followed, Liz tried to block out the anxiety, tried to focus on what she could control. But the truth was, she didn't believe it was real. She wasn't good enough. She wasn't smart enough. The doubt was crushing, but she kept going. She was used to pushing through things, even when they seemed impossible. Then one afternoon, an email arrived. The acceptance letter. She stared at the screen, not sure if she was seeing things. She read it again and again until the words finally sank in. She had been accepted to Harvard. Liz sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. Her heart pounded in her chest as she let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. She was going to Harvard. She was going to be someone. For a long time, Liz couldn't bring herself to celebrate. She was still trying to believe it. But as the shock wore off, she allowed herself a small smile. She had made it. After everything, after all the pain, the hardship, the struggle, she had made it. She was Harvard-bound. Harvard was a different world. Liz had never felt so out of place, so disconnected. The students here seemed so confident, so sure of themselves. They had everything she had never had: privilege, stability, a safety net. Liz couldn't help but feel like an imposter, a stranger in a world that didn't seem to care about where she came from. The academic pressure was suffocating. The work was harder than anything she had ever done before, and the weight of imposter syndrome hung over her every day. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to make it this far. But slowly, Liz found her footing. She remembered her mother's words, "You can do anything if you try hard enough." Those words were a lifeline, pulling her through the toughest moments. She thought about her father, his quirks, his strange love for books, and the way he had always tried to protect her in his own way. Those memories gave her strength, even when she felt like giving up. Liz wasn't going to escape her past. It was part of her, and no amount of privilege or stability could change that. But she began to embrace it. She learned to carry it with pride, to let it shape her, not define her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was growing, healing, and discovering who she was meant to be. Years passed, and Liz found herself on stage in front of a packed auditorium, sharing her story with hundreds of young people who were struggling just like she had. Her face was now known around the world, her story a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost or invisible. She had written a memoir, one that detailed her journey from the streets of the Bronx to the halls of Harvard. It wasn't just a story of survival, it was a story of triumph. Liz had become an advocate for homeless youth, visiting schools, talking to kids who thought they had no future, showing them that there was always a way out. As she stood before the crowd, looking out at the faces of young people who saw themselves in her story, Liz felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had come so far. And in that moment, she knew that no matter where you started, no matter how impossible it seemed, you could change your ending. You could rise above it all. Liz had become more than just a survivor. She had become a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of what was possible when you refused to give up. Her journey wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who ever dreamed of something more. The final message was clear. No matter where you begin, you can write your own ending. Liz Murray changed her ending, and so can you. If this story inspired you, click like and share it. Tell us in the comments, what's one dream you refuse to give up on? We read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe, because here, every story reminds us, it's never too late to rewrite your future.